guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, part 4 of our roll top desk build. Well, when we left off with last week's show, we had glued up the entire desk with the 2 pedestals for the drawers. I just want to show you a couple pictures from that glue up process. Now, each one of these pictures basically represents one glue up, and it was left to dry overnight. So I found it much easier, and you might as well, to just glue up the pedestals to the drawers individually. So I glued up the drawer pedestal and the face frame for the drawers on the left first, and then I did the one on the right after that, gluing it to the back panel with that center face frame for that center drawer. It's just a lot less to deal with, a lot less to be mucking around with, and hopefully as you go, you will be cleaning away your squeeze out that you notice as you are gluing this thing up. Well, now it's time to give the entire desk a really good sanding. Get all of that, the rough edges off, clean it up, make it look as pretty as you possibly can. And once we get that done, we need to start working on the supports that go inside each one of these drawer pedestals to house the hardware for our drawer. So here we have the front face frame of the left side drawers. I still need to sand this front surface here, but our hardware will get mounted down this way inside these panels to allow our drawers to slide in and out. The problem is with a face frame installation, you have this lip here underneath, and if you mount the hardware to this back panel, you're not going to be able to utilize it because it's just going to hit here on the face frame. So what we have to do is take a measurement from the inside of this face frame panel for the thickness, and we're going to mill a bunch of poplar that will be exactly the thickness of what this face frame overhangs. And we're going to put support boards from the face frame here to the back of our drawer pedestal in each and every one of these holes on both sides, so that we have something to mount our drawer hardware to make it usable, basically. So take that measurement, mill the stock, and once you get the stock milled, we're going to talk about the widths that will be put into place here in each one of these openings. Well, if I measure the overhang from the face frame to the side panel here, I get 1/2 inch. So at each drawer, the drawer glides are going to be mounted in the center of the drawer, and the particular drawer glides that I've chosen are just under 2 inches wide. So I'm going to need a strip of 1/2 inch thick material. I'm going to go 2.5 inches wide to give me a little bit of play, a little bit of wiggle room, as I like to say. 2.5 inches wide, 26 inches long. That'll give me plenty of room to brace it and support it inside, and 1/2 inch thick. So I'm going to need 2 of those for each drawer. So why don't we mill those and get those installed in place? If your measurement here is different for some reason, that's fine. Just mill the thickness of stock that you need. And for these pieces here, I'm just going to use poplar. I won't be using oak for that. Try to drop some of the weight of this and use poplar for these rails for your drawer glides. Well, I've got all the drawer hardware support pieces cut, and funny thing, something happened in the build, and at one point in time I snapped off a 1/4 inch bit and had to change to a different 1/4 inch bit, and I guess the setup changed ever so slightly enough that the one panel is out ever so slightly. What that means in the whole scope of the build is that all of these pieces here are milled to a half an inch thick, but these ones here are just ever so slightly thicker, almost a 1/16, and that is because of that misalignment in the routing. It really didn't change anything as far as the build goes. It just means that I had to make adjustments to these 4 rails, and I've marked them down here so I don't get them mixed up when installing. Also, I think I said I was going to make them 26 inches long. I actually went a little longer. I went 26.5, and that way there's a little less play in these things front to back, so they fit a lot nicer in that pedestal where the drawer hardware goes. So now that these are all cut, there's really not much more to do with these other than to very carefully install them. And you want to remember they're going to go into the center of each drawer. So that's going to be our next step, is we're going to install these rails. Well, our next step now is to install these drawer glide supports. And it's a simple installation. We're not going to go crazy on this. I did say that I want my drawer glides to be centered on my drawers top to bottom. So our drawer glides, or our supports for them, are just going to get sat in place just like this, centered in the hole for our drawer, making sure that this section here is flush to our face frame, and a little bit of glue in the back to hold it in place. I also want to use some screws for this. So a couple things to keep in mind. Don't use screws that are too long to come through your stiles out here. Also, countersink your screws so they're not getting in the way of your drawer hardware once you get it in there. And lastly, you may want to sit your hardware here in place and make sure that the screws that you're going to use to mount this support rail are not going to get in the way of the mounting holes that mount the hardware for your drawers. So for me, I've determined that if I come in from each end at 1 inch, I should be just fine with that. With the drawer glides being 22 inch for this project and this being 26.5 to the back, I don't have to worry about the back one, but this front one for sure you want to pay attention to. And if you're going to put mounting screws in the middle section, if it lines up with one of the rails, that's just fine too. Just make sure that it doesn't interfere with the mounting holes of your hardware. Well, I'll just show you with one exactly how it is that I'm installing these. I've placed a mark on the center here, and I've placed a small mark on this side of the board in the center here. So we're just going to roughly line it up, get it in place, and because these are fairly tight fitting, they should sit there fairly nicely for you. I'm going to line up our lines there so that they line up perfectly, and then clamp it in place so that I can still see the line. That way if anything shifts, I'll know right away. Then I'm going to get a framing square, place it against our face frame of our drawers, and clamp that into place as well so that it's not going to move. Then bring your drawer glide support up flush to that square and drill yourself a pilot hole. Now this is a little unorthodox, but because of the space in there, I'm actually using an impact driver to drill this pilot hole. So make sure everything's square and lined up. Drill your pilot hole, and I'm using number 8 by 1 inch wood screws for this, and we will just screw this side into place. Now if we're happy with that, then we'll just check it again with the square, and then we'll do the same thing on this outside countersunk hole. You want to start from the bottom and work up so that your framing square has room at the top to come out. If you start from the top to the bottom, you're going to have a few issues. So carry on and install all of these hardware supports. Once you get all of these installed, if you want, you can add some glue in behind these rail supports. For now, I'm just going to leave them until I know that everything lines up correctly, and I'll probably glue them in place afterwards. And there we have all of the glide supports installed in not only this side, but they're also in the right side. Now the ones that I haven't done yet, and there's a reason for that, that will be our center supports for our center drawer, and those are actually going to be 1 inch in width. I don't have any 1 inch stock right now, but when I'm milling the next time I will get that, and the installation is exactly the same as these, so I don't think we need to repeat the process. But what you'll need to do is install those supports for that center drawer the same way you did for these drawers in the pedestal. Well, what's the point of having all of this poplar installed for your drawer glide supports without the drawers? So that will be our next step in this build, is to assemble the drawers. Now we're going to have to mill a lot of stock here, and it's all 1/2 inch thick with the exception of the bottoms, which will be 1/4 inch ply. I'm using oak ply just to keep it consistent and give it a little nicer look. But the sides of the drawer, not including the faces, will be 1/2 inch poplar of various thicknesses. Now what I'm going to do is the thickness or the depth of the drawer. If it's a 3 inch drawer, I'm going to be milling the stock to 1/2 inch shorter than that, so 2.5. If it's a 4 inch drawer, 3.5. For the 6 inch drawer, 5.5. For the 11.25 inch drawer, well, you get the idea, 10.75. So for all of these drawers, they will be 1/2 inch shorter than what their actual openings are. So we can mill all this 1/2 inch stock, and then you need to think about what type of joinery you want to use for these drawers. For me, I'm going to be doing dovetails just because I haven't used my Lee dovetail jig in a while, and I want to. That's no other reason than that. Some of the drawers, those dovetails will actually be hidden by the drawer hardware, but I'm not too concerned about it. That's the joinery I want to do, and that's what I'm going to do. For you guys, you may want to consider the plans call for something else. Rabbet joints, etc., etc., etc. You may want to have a look at that and make a decision what you want to do. But don't forget when you're making your drawers to find out how much space your drawer glides need and make the appropriate adjustments. For me, my drawer glides require 1/2 inch on either side clearance in order to make that drawer work. So my drawers will actually be 1 inch smaller side to side than the width of the opening. But enough talking. Let's get to milling the 1/2 inch stock, and from there we're going to cut it to size. I don't think we need a video of that. So I will see you when I get all of the stock cut. Well, here we are with all the stock milled and cut to its proper width. The lengths have not been cut yet because there's one more thing that I want to do, only because it takes time to wait for, and I want to get it done first so I can move on with making these drawers. I've labeled them all. This is L1, L2, L3, L4, and that refers to the left-hand side, numbered from top to the bottom. Here we have C for the center drawer, and R1, R2, and this is the important one here that I want to deal with now, which is R3. This will be the bottom right-hand drawer. That is the filing drawer. This drawer is 11.25 inches deep, or in our case 10.75. I don't have that kind of width of a stock, so I need to laminate this. So this is what I want to work on next, is getting these pieces glued together so that they're ready for me later when I go to dovetail that particular drawer. I'm going to use dowels to laminate it, and of course these will get laminated just like this. Let me move these out of the way. The side pieces and the front pieces will get laminated like this to give me a wide enough board. I'm going to put dowels probably at every 2 inches. And that may seem like overkill, but this drawer is going to take some abuse, and I want it to be able to handle that abuse. So I'm going to laminate these together. We don't need a video of it. You saw me use the doweling jig back when we did the face frames. Same concept, same process. Let's get these boards laminated so that they'll be ready for our dovetailing a little later on. Well, every 2 inches may have been a little over-ambitious. So I'm going to continue with this only because I've done it already. And we're going to see how this goes together, see how we can line these up. Let's see here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 dowels to line up here. Like I said, maybe a little over-ambitious on my part, but let's give it a try and see how we do. Yeah, like I said, maybe a little ambitious, but I'll get it together and then I'll glue up the other panels. Well, I got it together and I'm exhausted. So every 4 inches, let's put these dowels, not every 2. So there we go. Live and learn. Don't be so bloody ambitious in the shop. Okay, so now that you guys are done laughing, carry on and glue up the rest. Well, now that we've got those pieces for our file drawer laminating, we put those aside, and I'm going to move forward by cutting all the pieces of the drawers to their final length, starting with the front and back pieces of each drawer. Now, the openings in our face frames are 10 3/4 of an inch wide or across. So in order to leave that 1/2 inch on either side, of course, we lose an inch. So all of the pieces front and back will be ripped to 9 3/4 of an inch. Well, you've got all those cut, and now you need to cut the side panels for these drawers, and those will all be cut to length at 22 inches long. And with all the drawer sides and fronts and backs all cut to their final dimension, of course there's nothing left to do with these pieces other than break out the dovetail jig and make some drawers. I've dug out the Lee dovetail jig, and I'm going to start the process now of routing all of the dovetails for these drawers. And like I said, you don't have to do dovetails if you don't like. The plans call for something different, and if you're following these plans, by all means, use the joinery that they suggest if you don't have a jig or you're not comfortable with it. I'm not going to go through the setup of this jig There is a video on the channel if you want to see that. If I remember, I'll post a link to it in the comments or in the description of the video, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to continue now with the routing. We're going to start off with routing the tails on these drawers first. Well, it probably goes without saying, but now that we have all of the tails routed, we're going to route the pins. And the dry fit of these drawers looks good. I'm happy with it. The joints are tight, but not too tight that it doesn't allow glue. You're going to need to make sure that you give allowance for that. There's no glue on this at all, and it's tight enough to hold together on its own, but still enough space and loose enough that we can get glue in there to hold these together. Now, I'm going to carry on and route all of the dovetails for all of these drawers, and then once I get that done, I'll come back and see you, because there's more to do than just dovetailing on these drawers. And after many hours with the router in hand, we have all 8 drawers dovetailed and dry fit. So what we're going to do now is give all of these a sanding inside and out, mostly on the inside. We're not too concerned about the outside at this point because we can sand that after. So sand all the inside surfaces, and we're going to move on to the next step. Well, I had this idea, and it's an idea that will completely eliminate every bit of clutter in the drawers of your desk. And I'm telling you right now, I swear it borders on brilliance. Like, I am a freaking genius for this. And what my idea is this. Check that out. No bottom in the drawer means no clutter. It is absolutely brilliant, but no. My wife says it makes the drawers unusable. Unusable, my eye. Anyway, apparently I have to put bottoms into these drawers. And due to the fact that we are completely out of time this week, that will be the first thing on the agenda for next week's show. So guys, I hope you're enjoying this series so far. I want to thank you so much for joining me along for the ride. This project so far has been a heck of a lot of fun. I hope that if you're following along, building your own, that you're having as much fun as what I am in making mine. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to bring this show to a close, and I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.